it's time for you to walk in greatness. Let's murder mediocrity. Slay your goals, live out your dreams. Inspirational perspective.
Shout out to the University of Memphis, the Empowered Man of Color. They're on campus. Those brothers spent the day with them yesterday, flew back yesterday. And just a phenomenal conversation with them around redefining the narrative of the African American man. That was the conversation. And I shared quite a bit with them. If we have the opportunity, then I'll share some of what I share with those men at the University of Memphis, with you all as well. Here is the one thing that I did share to open up, and I want to share it here so we can just even begin to think about how we look at ourselves. And again, I'm talking about African American men. So one, and this is one question: are we ready to redefine what being an African American man really means? Like, are we ready to redefine that? Because I think in some ways there's been a definition set that doesn't serve us. And you'll see why in a moment here. According to the Bureau of Justice statistics, 1 in 3 black men, and listen to this, 1 in 3 black men can expect to go to prison at least once in their lifetime. 1 in 3. And that's well over the average across any other, quote unquote, race or ethnic group. But then I was looking at some additional data. And this data said that there has been, in the last 30 years, and so think about, okay, the last 30 years, right? So 2021. So we're looking like back into the early 90s. In the last 30 years, there's been nearly an 80% increase in black male adolescent suicide or suicide attempts. So again, like kind of looking at all this, right? So if I'm a African American man or even a boy, then what I have to look forward to in these United States of America is the 33% chance of going to prison. Or if you're a mother and you're raising an African American boy, right? This is what's going on, right? 33% chance that I'll spend some portion of my lifetime in prison. And that's not hard to in any way believe, because we all know somebody that's been to jail. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh yeah, my cousin, my uncle. I mean, we all know somebody has spent some time or is currently spending some time, or some of us are maybe even writing a letter right now to someone who's spending a significant amount of their time in prison. Here's something else that I came across that I thought was really interesting. Up until the early 80s, again, we were talking about manhood last week. Up until the early 80s, there was basically, when you look at African American marriage, it was on par or even higher than any other community in the country. Okay? And then in the 80s, what happened in the 80s? We all know, right? This is when the war on drugs, or another way to say it is the war on the African American male, took place. And you see this gap begin to form in the 80s, into the 90s, into the beginning of the 21st century. And that gap continues to widen, where there is a drop in African American marriage. I began doing some more research on the African American male, and what I found is on average, the African American man or male will earn $10,000 less than any other male in the United States of America. So that means that if I'm an African American male and I want to be on par or above the income average of other males, I must be above average. Like, I must be above average. I must be excellent at what it is that I do. So in some ways, we can begin to see that, like, I don't know about you all, but what I began seeing right away is that there's, like, if I didn't know better, I would think there was a deliberate attack on men or boys that look like me. At the same time, let's bring this to the situation we're currently in with identity, right? At the same time, we as a group, we still haven't released or fully recovered from the slavery event, right? And you say, well, Linal, what are you talking about? I think sometimes we forget. I saw this not too long ago. I thought it was really, really interesting that you take someone like let's put it this way. So you have a Thomas Jefferson, right? Thomas Jefferson is one of the so-called founding fathers of this country. And before he passed away, Harriet Tubman was alive, right? And I think it goes another way, but you have him as a founding father. He passes away. Basically, to put it like this, because I'm messing it up, we're only really 3 solid generations away from the founding of this country. Like 3 hardcore solid generations when you look at the lifespans of certain people, from Thomas Jefferson to, let's say, right in the middle there, you might have like a Frederick Douglass to, let's say, then a Ronald Reagan. Again, there's 3 generations, and all these men, like, between death and birth overlap. And now Ronald Reagan is gone, and here we are. So in some ways, you could say this is like the beginning of the 4th generation of these United States. And I think sometimes when we think about where we are as a people, like, we've forgotten what we've gone through and the fact that that still impacts us. Dr. Joy DeGruy explains this in her book, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, where she says that recent research in the field of epigenetics has revealed that trauma can actually impact an individual's DNA. And the manifestations of the traumas experienced by prior generations can be passed along genetically to offspring. Now, where am I going with all this? So, one, we're still dealing with the wounds and the traumas of slavery. And by the way, slavery has been romanticized. So unless you've done some real work to understand the actual horrors of that institution, like, you probably don't really realize how much trauma is built up inside of you if you are the descendant of slaves, okay? So that's one. And that's one of the reasons we go back to Ghana every year. And we take people to Ghana because there's a release that takes place, like an actual, like, release that takes place when you're informed. You actually know, okay, there's some healing that needs to be done, and we call it a place of healing. Now imagine if, as an African American, you never ever give this any credence or thought. You don't even realize that you're walking around carrying your great-great-grandfather's or your great-great-grandmother's wounds. I think this is why many of us don't understand why we conduct ourselves or show up the way we do. Like, why? I don't know why I did that. So you have that. Then you have a direct assault that took place with the war on drugs, starting with President Richard Nixon, picked back up by President Ronald Reagan, to assault the family structure of our community. And again, you have to remember that the powers that be, they understand the impact of what they do. It's not a mistake. Like, we didn't know when we had the war on drugs, it was going to destroy the African-American family. They knew. That's the whole idea of implementing a system like that. I think we have to get to a point where we fully understand that the intent was never for us to be active members of this society, and the intent is still not for us to be active, voting, contributing members of this. It still makes people angry. I mean, right now we're looking at 2 trials in the United States of America, the land of liberty and justice, where there is an African-American male that in some way seems to be on trial even in his death, right? An African-American male whose life was taken due to the context of racism. We're going to talk about that a little bit too, this context of race. And then you can see the flip side, of where this Rittenhouse boy is being romanticized and sympathy, people have sympathy. Oh, well, and then you can even see in the op-eds in the media where the media is saying, oh, the little boy really wanted to support the cops and he wanted to do the right thing and he just got caught in a bad situation. And then here is a brother that looks like me who's unarmed walking through a community where we have to defend the fact that he was even there. So this is our current reality. For the men who are listening, you have to know that even if you grew up in the best of households, your parents still have unresolved trauma if they haven't gone through therapy, if they haven't addressed the dysfunctions of their families. Because, again, we went through 400 years of captivity, slavery, bondage, and then for a little bit over 100 years, we've had this, so-called freedom that also included the errors of Reconstruction, broken promises, stolen money. I can go into that deeper, but you ever wonder why your grandparents have an adverse opinion of the bank? It's because, there were African Americans who actually had money stolen out of the bank, and there was nothing done about it. So these are the things that we experience, and you begin to wonder about, even right now when you look at our current economic situation, if what we did work for and create and earn wasn't stolen from us, where could we be? And so in many ways, even after so-called freedom, we've still been under assault. And my point in saying all this morning is that we have to understand that the war is not over. We are still at war. And if you're raising a young African-American boy, then you have to really, in many ways, understand that you're raising a soldier. That's the only way that he's going to survive in this environment. What do soldiers have? Skill, discipline, intention. And those are three elements that I see missing in our community when it comes to boys: skill, discipline, and intention. To the man, successful men ask for help. This is what I was talking to the young men about yesterday. Successful men ask for therapy, and successful men ask for coaching. I want us to really see what we're up against, because I believe sometimes, again, there's a romanticization that takes place. And I also believe that as a community, we're incredibly distracted. There's always something new to watch, always a new game to play, or always a new outfit to buy. Oh, don't tell me they just dropped. And so I do believe we're incredibly distracted. And in that distraction, the one point, did you all know that our actual spending power as a community jumped by $3 billion over the pandemic? Like we actually have more spending power. I wonder where that came from. PPP. Anyway, but it's up to 1.6 trillion documented. 1.6 trillion in spending power. As a group of, as a collective community, if we had a gross, domestic product, right, overall that we were trading with other people, then with that type of spending power, we would rank in the high 20s in countries in the world. But where there's no vision, the people perish. And we just don't have a collective vision. It's almost like, and I want to talk about this a little bit, is that we have been programmed to survive. And by the way, some of that is, I mean, in many ways is okay. I mean, it's understandable because of the 400 years of slavery and the fact that trauma is still not healed. And this is one of the reasons why as a group, we have to focus on our healing. Yesterday, young brother got up and sang the Negro national anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing. Got me thinking about Brother Eugene Williams. If you're out there, a shout out to you. Or Dr. Eugene Williams. And so the brother got up and sang, and the ending of the song, there are two powerful statements, two powerful stanzas. He says, "True to our God," and I want to put an emphasis on our God, O-U-R, capital G-O-D, our Creator. Because I think we also have to remember that in many ways that during slavery, it wasn't just the physical trauma that we suffered. It was also the mental trauma. One of the things I want to talk about in the second hour is mindset. And so the mental trauma that took place, and so even how we think about our deity is unlike any other group of people around the world. You go to India, their deities look like them. You go to China, their deities look like them. You go to any other part of the world, Europe, we know their deities look like them. And then when we look at our deities, or even the image of our deities, they look like our oppressors. And this is, you guys know this already, but just think about the psychological damage that does to one's social esteem. And then we wonder why we have imposter syndrome when we get into positions of power. It's all psychological. It's mindset. And they have done a phenomenal job in the colonialization of Africa, where even our God over there doesn't look like us. Think about the brother Freddie Jackson, and he went back to Ghana specifically because he wanted to make sure the young children at the school, Cape Coast School of the Deaf and Blind, for the ones that could see, they didn't have a deity that didn't look like them in their rooms, and initially they did. Psychological warfare.
What I'd like to leave you with is Marcus Garvey said that while others can take the chains off your body, only you yourself can take them from your mind.
Man.
He said we must emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. But our problem is we are in denial as a people that those chains exist. So we have no incentive to try to remove them.
Mm-hmm.
So we have got to, and this is why your program is so vital and so necessary. We've got to overcome that heart and mind damage. What was that? It was discovered. You got it. And on June 18, 2009, when the United States Senate and Congress voted to apologize for slavery and confess to all the stuff they did, but they said, we don't have any reparations to give you. And then you can have these vulgar people in office say they're going to give $450,000 a piece because you border breakers who done broke into the country.
Right,
they brought their children, exposed them to harm's way. And then they had the effrontery to say, you didn't put us in no family jail, and you separated us, and therefore we've got to pay you.
Yep, almost $500,000. This is what we have to really take notice of, and I think this is one of the reasons we're so distracted. And it would make sense that we're distracted because in many ways I believe that we're still licking our physical and mental wounds. Like, that's a lot to be with when you're wounded. And it's easier to just ignore and self-soothe than to actually say, well, wait a second. I remember I saw that same thing in the paper, and I thought almost $500,000. And by the way, it was not right what was done during the Trump administration to illegal aliens and those who are trying to immigrate into the United States of America. As a person that loves people and loves life, that was not right. However, at the same time, you have to see this whole notion of skipping responsibility. Like, if we're going to give, then let's give to everyone that's been wronged. And what the group of people that has been wronged the most by this country are African Americans, the people who we don't know. We were separated from our parents from birth. We were stolen from our land. We don't know our language. We don't know our identity. All those things. And in many ways are still reeling and healing. I want us to continue to notice the attack, like on our community from the very beginning, took place with the men. The more, like, if you study slavery, it was the man they emasculated. If you study slavery, I mean, it was the man that they went after. And to this day, they continue to go after our boys and our men. And at what point do we begin to, in some ways, put a shroud of protection around boys from the moment they're born to the moment they actually become men and they can enter the world as a warrior? I'm afraid they're capturing the mind of our boys before we have them. think this is important for us to remember that all truth can be used as a hook to pull people into another lie. And this is why it's so important that this conversation about to have about the three aspects of identity. This is why it's so important that we know who we are and that we connect for ourselves. So let me cover this, and then Maurice, you're up next, brother. I just want to put this on the table, and then we'll dive into it a bit more after the phone calls. But here are the three aspects of identity. And again, it's to bring more context to the conversation. Why are we having a conversation about identity? Because, well, most of us don't know who we are. And so the three aspects of identity are your spirit, your soul, and your body. Now, what I was sharing with the Facebook audience over the break is that one of the reasons for the confusion that we have is, one, very few of us tap into the spirit. And for those of us who have access to the soul, right, that brother has soul, right? For those of us who tap into the soul, it's noticeable. And then the body itself, let's just talk about the physical aspect of identity called the body. The body itself, for many of us, goes ignored, and it is the tangible part of your identity. Let's just think about that right quick. The body is the physical representation of you in this earth realm. The soul is not necessarily tangible, right? You can feel it, and you can feel the vibrations of another one's soul, right? You can feel the impact of another one's soul. They call them soul ties. Like, why can't I stop thinking about him? Oh, I love him, but he don't treat me right. Why do I feel this way about him? Well, there's an aspect of his identity that you're now tied to, and we don't even begin to understand that. That's a whole nother realm. But the soul, right? But that's not tangible. You can't touch it. And the spirit, your creative force, and your reason for being. But let's just talk about the body. I don't even think we're ready to go into a conversation about the spirit and the soul because most of us aren't even fully in the body. What do I mean by that? Like, we don't take care of ourselves. We don't take care of our health. We don't take care of our body. We don't watch what we eat. We're not even tied to our physical identity in a way that we will take care of that. Now, there's somebody right now saying, well, this body is dust and it's dirt, and it's going to go back to the dirt and the dust, and the focus should be on the spirit. And what I would say to them is that the body and the spirit is how you gain your creative force in this realm. And so if you're all spiritual and no body, then your ability to powerfully create will not be there. I can say will not be there. Just won't be there. You have to have some understanding of the body because that's how you create in the earth realm. That's what actually builds the bricks. The spirit is how you declare, but then you have to take physical action. And that's done with the body. And many of us are too tired to take physical action because we're not taking care of the body. So you can create a spiritual word of creation through declaration. But then when it comes time to act, there's a breakdown of your spiritual power because of the body. So that's why we're just going to stick to the body. How are you taking care of yourself? See, we have to understand that this attack is multidimensional. So it's not just an attack on the mind, it's also an attack on the body. Look at our community. Again, we lead high blood pressure, right? Hypertension, high blood pressure, heart disease, kidney failure. I can go down a list of things that we lead in. Why are there so many DaVita dialysis buildings in our community? Because we're the ones that need it. We need it because we took all the hypertension medication, right? They told us our blood pressure was high. Hey, this is how it works. Go to the doctor. Doctor's like, woo, blood pressure is high. You should change your diet. They're going to give you like 2 or 3 chances. Nowadays, they probably even won't. Like, your blood pressure's high, take this medicine. But this is how it normally goes, right? You go to the doctor, hey, blood pressure's high, try to get it down, right? And again, we're talking about just the physical, the 3 aspects of identity. We're just talking about the physical. You say, oh, okay, I got to change my diet. Most of us go, oh. Like, we're so, and again, this goes to the fact that we need healing. I talked about it, I think 3 weeks ago when I talked about chitlins, right? Thanksgiving's coming. And like, that's how you know that something's not right with the mind. Something's not right with the mind when we still romanticize the slave masters, in many ways, joke, eat this. Eat this. It's like, oh, I remember my ancestors, Linal. I'm pretty sure they don't want you to remember them that way. But we put that into our body, and it has spiritual and soul implications. So then we got high blood pressure. We go to the doctor, and they give us medicine. Take this. And we go, oh, great. If I pop this pill, I can eat what I want. So then we pop the pill, not understanding that the kidneys are not designed to break down that synthetic material. And so eventually the kidneys go out. And now we are at DaVita for kidney dialysis, or wherever it is that people go. And the body is broken. One of the major aspects of identity. Let me say this with as much reverence as I can. Whenever the body is broken that way, it's a representation of other things that are broken within the mind, within the spirit, and within the soul. This conversation for me is about awareness. I always share with my coaching community that everything starts with awareness. When there's no awareness, there's no access to choice. And when I think about, the conversation we're having today, like all I'm doing is poking awareness. Like, go look for yourself. Go look, and I've told people all the time, like, don't trust me, don't believe me. Go look for yourself. Go look for yourself. Because all I want to do is drive awareness, because that awareness then brings access to choice. And the more choices you have, the more intentional you can be. Because then you can say, I choose this with intention, powerful intention. And when you make a choice like that, it drives transformation, and our community needs transformation. Duchess, let me ask you this. You said a lot, and I agree with a lot of what you said. What's the one thing you want the audience to take away?
Oh, to go home with, to think about?
That's right.
If, what he said, if you go back to God, see, this is what's wrong. We don't have love because we don't have God. God is love. Mm-hmm. God is love, and we have no unity. This is why we build in unity in our own communities. So if you go back to God, which is love, and then God will teach you how to love. He will teach you how to love yourself first.
So what I hear you saying, sister, is that we as a people, we have to reconnect with the Creator. That's what I'm hearing.
Ain't nothing else.
Gotcha.
If you think I'm playing, if I can tell you some dreams and some things, I predicted 2020. It's on videos. I predicted that. God said, I'm telling my people what I'm saying. But the people have heart.
I agree with you. And in a lot of ways, there was an era shift. Yeah, there was an era shift going into 2020. 2019 was a significant year. And for anyone that reads the stars, that is documented. That is definitely documented, that there was a shift that took place during that period. My mom taught me something years ago, and I'm going to share that here And Rashid, you're up next, brother. She was like, Linal, whenever you're looking to research or learn something, especially if it's of a spiritual nature, you have to be guided by the Spirit itself. So to answer that question, I can give you some tips, but again, like where you begin, I would say you begin where the Spirit takes you. So that's first, okay? Like you begin where the Spirit takes you. So where are you curious, and where is there for you a gap where there's passion and a spiritual notion that needs to be filled? Because then you'll be guided down that path. All right, that's one. Like for instance, the sister threw out that King James was black. Like, okay, that's cool. I don't know that I'm being guided to actually do a whole lot of research on that. And at some point I might be. And so I follow where the Spirit guides. Okay. And so that's one piece. In terms of how you do your research, when you research, first you have to understand that everything is in the context of language. And so we're using the English language, which is just one context. You have to remember that. This is one of the reasons why when I'm speaking, I often talk about the etymology of the word, right? Because the etymology typically takes us to a Latin or Greek meaning. And unfortunately, we have to remember this, that we have been brought up in a society that has canceled all knowledge of ancient Kemet, and that Greek and Roman and Latin education was built on that. It was stolen from that. So you have to remember that. So even when I'm looking at the etymology of a word, I have to remember in my research, until I can take it back to the very beginning. What is the beginning of civilization? It's proven. We know that in the Sinai Peninsula, ancient Kemet, Ethiopia, that spanned all the way to the west coast of Ghana, and the Atlantic Ocean used to be called the Ethiopian Ocean. That is the base of knowledge and civilization. So even when I do my research and I break it down in the context of language and the etymology itself, I'm still looking at a version that is derived from another original version. And this is really important, because what happens is we'll gain some knowledge and we'll look at it as absolute truth, and we have to remember that it can still be questioned. I really want us to get this. It can still be questioned. Life is about a search for knowledge. And the deeper I go, the more that is revealed. And you have to remember, as it's revealed, there's so many pockets and gaps in even my understanding. I'm still learning. So that's the other piece. As you research, remember the context that you're researching in is in the English language. That's only one context. Here's the other piece. One, you always find multiple sources that back up what it is that you are now looking at or even believing. Multiple sources. So I need a source from here, a source from there. I want to see the historical relevance. Before I share something with you all, I'm going through multiple sources. And even then, I'm saying, check my sources. You go do the work for yourself.
But I just wanted to highlight that, because I heard what you were saying, and I wholeheartedly am passionate about that. And being specific and intentional, as you said,
yeah,
and being specific to your own inner self. I think just being tapped into who you are within is a very important aspect of your own development and development of us as a humanity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for those comments. Really thoughtful comments. He's right on so many levels. I just want us to start eating the right thing. Then we can get to the rhythm of when it should be eaten. Like, we're not even eating the right stuff, man. And so then it's like, but he's going to another level, right? Because then as you begin to eat better, you begin to realize that the body goes through certain patterns, and we're in tune with, we're in the earth realm, in tune with the earth realm. The earth realm goes through vibrations and rhythms, and so do we. And so there's a rhythm with which we should eat, what we should eat, when we should eat it. And that's what he's talking about. Right now, for most of us, just eat the right stuff. And then we'll get into the rhythms of when you should eat. But I appreciate the brother for that.
But King James, I heard that 2 or 3 times that he was black. And, it's kind of hard for me to believe. But it's not, but it is, because, they stole our identity. And I'm going to just go real deep.
Can I tell you why it's not hard for me to believe? So we have to remember that the construct of race, as we know it today, that's based on calling each other black and white and things like that, was created in the 13th and 14th century. All right, so this is a new thing. As strong as it is and as powerful as it is, it's a new thing. It hasn't always been here. There was a time, where we communed as human beings, and it was more about overall ethnic groups, right? So and that ethnic group was tied to a land. So it's not that I didn't like that people. Maybe I wanted that land, or I was at war with that land or for that land. And it became a thing about race. And so could King James have been a man with dark skin? Absolutely. The Moors, they conquered Europe. And they were all over Europe. So I could see how that could happen. Somebody on the stream here said, I'm going to give you a second here and a second, Israel. Somebody in the stream said, well, what difference does it make? It makes a difference. It does make a difference. And again, it comes down to identity, because then it's like, that's interesting. And I can play on that and know that for myself, that someone that looked like me may have been the author of what now is the King James Version. So that does make a difference. I'll tell you this, brother, lead with love. And the reason I say lead with love, you have to remember that as some of us begin to come out of this, and I say begin to come out, right? Because, this is likely the beginning when you really look at where we are in the grand scheme of things. Again, just a little bit over 100 years out of slavery. And so as some of us begin to come out of this, we have to remember that many of our brothers and sisters are still caught in it, and they have a great reason to be. See, this is why I say lead with love, because often we come down with some level of condemnation and judgment. And it's like, how can I judge my brother or sister who is dealing with the trauma of 400 years of slavery that was full of horrors and travesties? They still have that those epigenetic wounds on them, and I'm judging them. I'm coming down hard on them. No, come with love, brother.
Hey, but look, I lead with love, and half your listeners, the BLM family know me. I come with love, I lead with love, but it's just some people with all these degrees. The black community got more degrees than the mama.
It's the same thing.
And they think they know everything, and I'll be transparent.
It's the same thing. Lead with love. Part of the reason. So you got to remember what drives many of us. It's this thing called, when you look at psychology, psychologists say that every human being has one of 16 different cognitive distortions. And many of us are suffering from a cognitive distortion of imposter syndrome and not being enough. We have been, in many ways, indoctrinated in this American society not to be enough. So when a brother and sister goes and gets multiple degrees, it's because there's something empty inside and they're trying to fill it. And then when a brother like yourself, who may not be as learned, who may not have as many degrees, come with knowledge.
No. High school graduate, that's it.
Okay.
I'm a doctorate doing this other stuff.
I believe me, I respect that and understand it. I'm a college dropout. And so when a brother like yourself comes with knowledge like this, it's triggering, because I've done everything I can to prop myself up in this American society so I can feel good about myself in a place where I'm hated, for what I look like and for who I be. And now here you come. And again, remember, I'm looking at this from the perspective of how things operate in the United States. It's not that way in Africa, right? Because you can have an elder with no education, everybody's quiet when he speaks.
Yes, sir.
Right? But here, it's like, oh, you have a doctorate, you've been indoctrinated, and so we're supposed to listen. And so just, again, sometimes you have to listen with love. One of the things I talk to the brothers about, and again, we're talking about identity, mindset, and manhood. I talked to the brothers about, and I told them at the end of my talk yesterday, I said, here's the thing I need for you all to remember more than anything else, that you are the original civil engineers, architects, mathematicians, scientists, doctors, surgeons, cultivators of civilization. And that is part of our identity. And so we have to remember that these things, the same way we have the epigenetic trauma of slavery, we also carry the genius of our ancestors. And we see it come out. Right now, you can look this up too, but there are more young people who are African American who are registered as geniuses than any other group. And it's because this is the source. Here's the one thing I want you all to take away. That there are three aspects of identity. And the aspect that we can touch, the aspect that we can see, the aspect that we can feel, we're out of tune with. As much as we want to talk about the spirit and soul, we still have not fully taken on the responsibility of the body. And so, this week, I challenge you, how can you become more connected with your physical body?